So let me start with the first questions. Each of your organizations are charged with very important public safety missions, or missions more largely public safety, emergency response, addressing citizen-centered outcomes. These missions have not only security and public safety elements to them, they increasingly have economic, community, and individual considerations that must be balanced with the continuous pursuit of better, faster, cheaper. It's important that we be able to differentiate what we do out of the United States from an increasingly competitive global economy that looks often towards alternative solutions. So how are the agencies that you support employing emerging technologies such as AI, robotics, 5G, cloud to improve mission outcomes? And let me go ahead and start maybe with Shawn and our system integrator on the panel.
You bet. Yeah, you see, I was like, okay, my next. So first, hey, thanks a lot, and I'm glad everybody could come. This is a great conversation, and I'm glad to be here as well. So first, I'd start off saying, better, cheaper, faster, pick two. Yeah. Because you're not going to get all three, right? Because when you look at the challenges and constraints that you have with time, how much budget do I actually have, what's the mission that's actually taking place, typically you're gonna pick two, right? And you're gonna figure out
and
what
use
that
emerging
means.
technologies. So
Right.
help us with the emerging technologies,
Right.
please.
Well, what I'm saying is it's important because you have to factor that in to every one of these models. And when you start to look at some of the, I'm going to say some of the agencies, so I'm also going to put on my former federal CIO hat, right? When you look through that lens, you have to look at where you are today and the mission today and some of the problems that have to be solved. And now a lot of the problems kind of go to that digital edge now. And when we say the digital edge, that really is finance, that's law enforcement, that's all of the above. And when you look at the elements that make up that and the innovation that's necessary to put into that and the factors and the problems, the outcome of the problems actually are life. In some cases, it's life and death. In other cases, it's actually financial impacts and the likes. So it's lots of opportunities when you look at leveraging AI, and I'm gonna talk about zero trust, right? Because zero trust is real. Sometimes we kind of talk over it a little bit because it's kind of like when cloud first came out, everybody said cloud, they were cloud, so it made cloud cloudy, right? So now everybody says that they are zero trust, and zero trust isn't a noun, it's a verb, it's an outcome, right? And when you look at what that means and you factor that into the decisions that are made, and you look at it from IT modernization, cyber by design, right? You start to pay attention a lot differently, right? So now you start to look at the edge. How can I actually have zero trust at the edge, right? And that's happening today, especially when you look at CBP and some of the other law enforcement agencies where you can have secure at the edge because you have to, because of the pervasive nature of how everyone computes.
I love that connection to Border Patrol, right? Because our borders nationally are no longer at the edge of our physical boundaries. We've got digital borders that are out there everywhere. They need to be protected if we're going to protect the nation. But Bobby, what kind of emerging technologies is FEMA using to achieve better outcomes for your mission?
Sure, thank you.
Either one will pick it up.
Well, my voice travels, right, so I want to make sure everyone can hear me. So I don't want to get into any specific implementations of emerging technologies from a FEMA perspective, but I would say that the federal government as a whole has truly embraced emerging technology in the form of artificial intelligence, RPA, such as robotic process automation, machine learning, even leveraging cloud-based solutions. Here at FEMA, we have a very unique mission set. And our mission is to help people before, during, and after disasters. And so from a emergent technology perspective, we're looking for solutions that would help us be able to better serve the American public. And so we're looking for trustworthy and resilient systems that are able to meet operational requirements at the speed of the mission. And so we have, essentially leveraged cloud-based solutions over the past 2 or 3 years. The intent is to continue to leverage emerging technologies based on our core mission. And so it has to map back to a mission or a requirement per se. And so even though we have all, a treasure trove of emerging technologies that are available at our disposal, if it doesn't fit within our core mission set, then we would pretty much forego that. But I think we can all agree that AI is probably the way of the future now, and so we're looking at ways, where we can leverage AI, not only to serve the American public, but then also how we can gain better efficiencies from a FEMA perspective in terms of our cyber mission. Case in point, we can leverage AI, machine learning to parse through a treasure trove of information that we can then feed into our incident response capabilities. And so having your security analysts trying to identify indicators of compromise, we could essentially leverage AI to kind of identify that information up and up front. And so now we are focusing really on core mission, and then we're letting AI kind of pick up some of the heavy lifting on the back end. So from a FEMA perspective, again, and as a overall government perspective, we are utilizing emerging technology, but again, it goes back to your core mission and your requirements to support, your core mission. So.
Yeah, and Bobby, FEMA is deployed today, right? Hurricane Beryl, South Texas,
I kind of want my mic right here.
You're going to be thinking about, well, how do we first assuage ongoing suffering, but then how do we restore and recover, and things like counter fraud and those kind of missions.
But Bobby made a good point that I think everybody needs to kind of catch on to. Business/mission drives technology. Technology enables business to meet its goals and objectives, right? So it's not about the
But this is a good segue to Bob, because I don't think that's entirely true. There are some times where technology, invention, creates opportunities. And whether we like it or not, the commercial sector will build upon those opportunities. And this is core to CISA's mission, because your mission isn't just cyber for your own sake, right? It's cyber for the nation, for the economy, for an innovation economy, which we want to be bringing new products and services all around the world. So you've got this dual piece of protecting the economy, but also then within CISA, using some of these emerging technologies to be better at your own cyber. So can you talk to some of us for those two different universes?
Sure. Hopefully everyone can hear me. We're arguing with the microphones here, but I have a louder voice than you. So, I think I tend not to talk in like hyperbole often. Many of you have worked with me. I tend to be pretty direct. So I don't know that we can highlight that it's emerging technology. Some of these technologies have been there a long time. Some of us on the federal side, I'm like all the rest of you. If you're feds, I have very legacy systems that were part of CISA, or actually that I'm trying to upgrade from the formation of DHS, stuff that came over from DOD, and it's quite challenging. I think that we are pushing forward is, I'll have been there about 3 years now, the end of August. One of the best things that we can do internally, I handle the internal IT needs of the agency. So that's from employee endpoints, the systems we run. I serve as the authorizer for a lot of our cyber systems, and we work back and forth with the Cybersecurity Directorate. You'll hear from David Carroll shortly. We're all partners at CISA. I think what I'm trying to do is, no one's going to say, well, Bob Costello, you did a good job, you saved millions of dollars, but CISA was hacked every Tuesday around 3 p.m. So I try and make really risk-based decisions, which can be really hard because often we can't quantify the risk on some of our systems, because I've inherited some legacy systems that it's difficult to do that. So, one of the first things we started a number of years ago, kind of like 3 points. It was a very small office. It was about 40 people when I started there. It's about 500 now, with a lot of our partners in the integrator community. What we did is, it was a multi-year plan as we enter year 3. Like first year, build the right technical staff. Second year, start building stuff. Third year, we're deploying. So we're deploying into new CISA environments that are, one of the things I want to be able to say is these things are just CISA standards or our own guidance. I think that that's vitally important. And the second thing that, I often joke, like CIO either stands for Chief Information Officer or career is over. Could really go either way. Or I live in New York City too. There it's Chief Investment Officer. What we're trying to really do is, CISA had a very federated or fragmented approach to IT. My goal is not to run all the IT, but to enable the CISA mission operators to concentrate on their mission. And if that's deploying systems, that's wonderful. Can I take some of the noise floor off of you? Can I run your help desk for you? Can I deploy endpoints? And for other groups that are much smaller that probably shouldn't run IT, we took that over and provide it back to them and take their requirements. So it's really a partnership. On the AI front, definitely emerging, although AI is not new. I'd say what we did a little bit differently at CISA, we started really early with an AI action plan that you can view externally on our website. And then we have an internal plan that's a little more detailed that kind of goes over things. But I'd say, one of the best aspects of that has been a partnership between myself and the Chief Privacy Officer. We lead the responsible use of AI at CISA. And he very much serves as a check on me, because IT people, we'll just deploy anything. Give me your data, let's data mine it, it's great. So that partnership has been really fabulous, and I think that's what we're trying to do differently. To your point on CISA's, many missions, yesterday I had the opportunity to speak through our emergency communications division was running an event with many of the largest police departments across the country. And we were speaking extensively about, my prior roles at CBP and ICE. Like, we ran big radio systems. We ran systems that are really OT or IoT and hard to protect. They run for 20 or 30 years. The advantage that we have in the federal government, yes, we sometimes have budget problems. My budget problems are very easy to deal with compared to a local police department or others. So I think our role really is, how can we get our advisory services out there? Can you consume our cyber hygiene services and other services? Can we make it easier to sign up? At the end of August, we'll be dropping a new portal that my team's designed to make it easier for our partners to sign up for CISA services. Right now, it's like, send us an email. That's not always the best way, so we'll have a workflow management system that lets us kind of monitor that a lot better.
Well, Bob, I love that you brought up the Emergency Communications Division. It's a group that I have a special affinity for, all things 911,
Yep.
Emergency alerting, land mobile radios. We're here in AT&T's headquarters, FirstNet, and the other competitive broadband providers. I just coincidentally had the CEO of a company called Rapid SOS speak to my MBA students last night, and the topic to them was about a startup and what's your noble purpose for being a CEO, and how do you align the activities. And he brought up that they had just completed a partnership with Apple and with Google to now, for the first time, be able to support live stream, FaceTime into the 911 center.
Oh, wow.
And what was so interesting, and Michael's a great guy, Michael Martin. A year ago, Michael kind of knew the word AI. And last night, he's talked to me about the types of neural networks they're using in the AI, and he went all the way down to RAG, R-A-G, and how they're implementing artificial intelligence to address the challenge of, now you've got these videos at a crime scene, videos at an accident, and they're coming into the public safety answering point. And how do we not have all those call takers just be permanently scarred from PTSD from so they're using artificial intelligence to recognize that there's a scene that maybe should be blurred or should be preemptively addressed to help the end-to-end response. So this is the kind of example where the technologies have been around forever. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you that 2 years ago, everyone was talking cloud when they gave their testimony to Congress. This year, it's all generative AI. We get these storms of ChatGPT. And for July 4th, this year, the most number of calls to 911 that this nation ever experienced And part of it is we're just more connected than we were, and people called 911 for more things, and now they're calling with videos. So can you talk to us a little bit about the part of your mission that needs to balance we've got all this new data, but now we've got privacy and security concerns that need to be balanced. We need to be thinking about not only the data side of AI, but the algorithms, and do we have algorithm security? Well, what are you doing to get ahead of that? Or is this something that is next year's get ahead of?
Well, I think all of us, whether we're at FEMA or another part of DHS, so we all have like different authorities, and that was like very difficult for me to get used to. It says like I supported law enforcement most of my career, or the intelligence services, even when I was in uniform. I have
Evidence changed. You've got to take it all the way to prosecution, right? 911 call becomes evidence
Yep.
that you've got to have a chain of
Yeah.
custody.
Yeah, and often too, like there were different privacy rules for that. So we take it very, very seriously at CISA, and part of
What
that.
do you do about it?
Well, so I think that whenever I see an organization, there's still a few federal agencies that do it, where the chief privacy officer reports to the CIO. That's a pretty bad idea.
Yeah.
And so what we do is we have a very tight working relationship between privacy and the CIO's office and our mission operators. So I'd say that that's working quite well. Part of it is, I don't, or CISA does collect some PII or SPII, not to the volume of others. So often we can deal with it a little bit differently. We are looking at some technologies based on some different aspects of AI. You saw, ONCD Coker talking about CIRCIA. We have to share a lot of those reports. How do we anonymize them? How do we do things like that? So we're definitely exploring that. I'd say on, the first thing you have to do anywhere, and this is where I think CISA has really matured over the last 3 years. Like, no one wanted to talk to the CIO's office. And I get it. Like, no one ever calls a CIO and said, wow, that was the best help desk call I ever got.
It's because you guys say no all the time.
But we changed that to kind of say yes. And so
Get
people
to
are now
yes.
coming to us now and saying, I want to do this.
That's great.
And, it doesn't alleviate all the problems. Like anyone, I have either rogue IT or a program that they're like, we're ready to go FOC. We didn't even know you were here. So it's gotten better, but I would say like you have to, I've had to adjust even my personality. It says like I'm slightly less maybe aggressive than I was at CBP. Slightly. I think Dan's like, no, he's not. But I think those are things that we're doing here. Probably similar to FEMA, but probably a little bit different based on your mission.
Well, let's go to Bobby
Sure.
next, because Bobby, your agency all the time deals with people at a very dark part in their lives, right? They just lost their home, and they're now applying for a loan, or they're wanting assistance that to them, they want the assistance, but they also want a degree of privacy associated with that. How are you guys approaching this challenge, and what would you like to see from industry? What would you like to see for the group in this room to help you anticipate where the fraudsters are going?
Yeah, great question, by the way, too. And privacy and security, from my perspective, is a zero-sum game. And, one would assume that if you have a information system that is properly configured, securely configured, then the privacy piece would be handled by default. And so I kind of look at privacy and security, the balance. I look at the balance really from two different lenses, right? I look at it from a government perspective, where we have privacy and security controls that have to be implemented as part of the authorization to operate process. And so before any information system is allowed to operate in a production network or production environment, it has to have a set of security controls implemented, both privacy and security controls.
So it's not just security that you need to see baked in before granting an ATO. You need to see privacy
Correct.
included in there as well.
Yes, sir. So the NIST special publication 800-53 Rev 5 basically identifies a list of privacy and security controls that are applicable for any information system. And so before we decide to authorize a system, or again, put it out there to store, process, and transmit data, it has to have those agreed controls implemented. And so, like Bob was saying before, as the authorizing official, He would essentially review the authorization package, ensure that the risk is up to an acceptable level, and then he would authorize the system, again, based on a risk approach. However, I kind of look at privacy and security from a different lens, as we talk about the commercial side, right? And so I have, my mother is 65 years old right now, and, she's utilizing like ChatGPT and things of that nature to include social media, right? And so I think trying to better educate and train the user community on certain things about their privacy data and how it's important for them to really understand how their data is being collected, utilized, and also, shared amongst different entities. And so I was reading an article back when I was in Intel school many years ago, and then the
Last week.
It wasn't last week, but it was about the government surveillance program, but then also national security interests. And so there's a different part of me that says, well, how do you balance the nuances of privacy and security when you have national interests at play, but then you also have a right to protect personal data, right? And so, and I think another article, I think this goes back to when I was in the Marine Corps, when I think it was, I want to say San Bernardino, it was California, where I think it was a mass murder committed, and then I think the U.S. government wanted to access the information that was on the iPhone, and Apple said no. And so, again, trying to balance, privacy and security from that perspective, it's a real slippery slope. And so, from a government perspective, I would say that we have a pretty robust process in place in terms of security control requirements that need to be met. But then when I look at it from the commercial side of the house, I don't think we're there yet. And, again, in terms of national security interest, in terms of protecting, personal data, who wins? I mean, I understand that Apple did not turn over that data, but there needs to be a better balance, and also I would say a better partnership between the government and the industry in terms of what constitutes the sharing of personal data as it relates to national security.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's the San Bernardino case, and I actually was in the PSAP and spoke with the director of the Public Safety Answering Point of San Bernardino about 6 months after that, and he was a uniformed officer. He was just doing his 2 years in charge of the public safety answering points, which are 80 to 90% women. His deputy was the 20-year professional, had been doing 911 all his life. He, fortunately, at the time, was actually 2 or 3 blocks away from where the incident occurred. He went right to the incident, was the first officer on seeing the incident, and he said, at that point in time, I realized how much I didn't know about what my deputy knew in the execution of that job, because his planning world went to, in the Marine Corps, we call 5 and 25. Went right to the incident happened. I am thinking about staying alive, and then I'm thinking about the next officer that's going to back me up. And he said she was amazing. She had all this data at her disposal, and began to be his 5 minutes out, 10 minute out, 30-minute out kind of planner. And she recognized that they had a SWAT exercise going down with another jurisdiction and re-vectored them to, it's just a great story for which often that part of it gets lost when we look at, well, could we get into the phones or not? But that's a great example of what should citizens expect in the degree of protection of their data. And I think they should expect a whole lot, yeah.
Yeah, I do have one more point too before you pass it over to Shawn over here. I think my concern isn't about privacy and security as it relates to the government per se. I think my biggest concern is about all the information that that's available about me in the public domain, or all the information that we collectively share on social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram and whatever the case may be. And all that information, in a lot of cases are information that's available in the public space because you post it. And then once that information is collected by, different individuals and then it's fed into some type of AI capability, then what happens with that? And so for me, it goes back to, being cyber conscious, being, I guess, security aware, and understanding that you do have a right to understand how your data is being collected, how it's being utilized. But then there's also a responsibility on end users to ensure that they put the right guardrails in place to protect their data as well. So,
yeah. So yes, to users need to be aware, but I would also suggest that the CISO's umbrella for that very point that you raised is expanding and needs to continue to expand.
Correct.
Because even if you completely stay off social media, right, and have a 100% piece, maybe what you've done is create a vacuum that now can be filled by deep fakes. So cognitive attacks are real.
Yeah.
And we see cognitive attacks ongoing every single hour of every single day in Ukraine right now. On the front lines, both sides have set up bot armies that intend to take sometimes a accurate video, sometimes a doctored video, and then to transmit it from the actual location so that it can then get viral in a way that gets around the social media platform defensive measures to spot fakes. The job of a CISO, as we bring in social media, just gets harder, and we can no longer say we're protected just because I'm not using social media, right? If you're not looking at social media, somebody's probably on it for you. Yeah. I supported General Odierno in Iraq for the over a year while I was there. He had no time for social media, but somebody set up an account in his name and was soliciting donations for wounded warriors when he had a son who was a wounded warrior. And that's how pernicious it was. And that went on for over a year, where somebody in his name was stealing money off that. So this cognitive space now needs to be defended. And if the CISOs don't have a role in defending that, who within organizations do? But I do want to finish out the slate here with Shawn. That balance between privacy and security, how you use data to actually achieve positive security effects, with things like AI, but how you also, in that, respect the legitimate expectation of citizens to have their secrets kept secret.
So first, I'll come back to Bob's statement when career is over. So when I was a CIO, they basically said, hey, if we actually have a breach, you're going to be charged. Right, I was actually going to be charged.
The libel guy.
Right? I don't know if you all remember R, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act and the likes. So they basically said, hey, you're going to be charged. I said, well, great. I don't look good in orange, so we're going to get this done, so I won't be charged. But the story behind that is the information that was collected. It's not about the individual pieces of data. It's when you collect and connect that data that turns it into powerful information. So
the context around the data.
Well, because now you have the context, right? And then you can figure out other contexts, right? So now you start to look at privacy when you look at the challenges, right? One, and I like the way, like Bob put it, right? When you separate federal systems from, I'm going to say, individuals, right? When you look at the generation today, the younger generation, which is the majority that's actually using a lot of the technology today, right? They have a completely different perspective of what equals personal, right? So in essence, the information is getting put out, and it's going to happen, right? And now when you start to say, what does that mean when these individuals are also interacting with government systems now? Like when you have to get benefits, right? Could be child welfare or the likes, right? What have you? So you go to these systems. Now is when you have the issues with fraud, waste, and abuse, right? And now you have all this information that's out here. But now you start to get into how do you now? And now you get into this interesting balance of privacy and security when you're building the protection systems and the models that you're using to protect, when I always say I'll always be a civil servant, right? After 22 years. But in essence, you start to say, my job is to protect the information of this country and the citizens. In essence, you start to look at that a lot differently, and you start to look at the internals of that, because now you're bringing in sensitive information on individuals. You're bringing in, I know who's on the terrorist watch list. I can now do, third, fourth, and fifth degree between separation of individuals and the likes, and to entities, and to parent and child connections between entities, right? And now you start to say, you have some that would say that is an issue between privacy and security. But in essence, it's a role that you have to do to actually protect the mission that you're responsible for. And like I said, it's a domino effect. You can look at that in many models. I mean, you'd be surprised to actually know one of the key attack vectors is actually hospitals, right? I mean, and you look at, just think about the information that you have there, and ransoms of hospital equipment with people that are actually on the table. So it becomes interesting. So now zoom out. Federal systems, 100%. NIST 853 Rev 5, FedRAMP Rev 5, policies, controls have to be put in play, and that's when the whole continuous ATO comes into play. Because now, to me, it's one thing to say, I have a system infrastructure in play, but am I using old school governance, or do I actually have automation that verifies on a daily basis that these controls are, especially technical controls, but you can also use documentation as code, right, to actually do verification of some of the non-technical controls. But now to actually scorecard that and have that drive action out the other end, right? So now you work differently, right? Because that's the beauty in federal systems, because you do have to have an ATO. And that means you do have to go through this process to have all of the privacy and all of the security and the controls and how you execute them and how you can verify that they're actually in production. But I still say, when you begin to connect that zero trust with IT modernization, cyber by design, and you include continuous ATO, now, at least from a government perspective, government systems will be more resilient. And it's happening, right? And I can tell you now, several federal agencies, to include Department of Treasury, VA, I mean, several DOD type agencies actually have implemented this, right? So it's not something that's like sci-fi, it's real and can happen.
Well, I love the idea of the continuous risk scoring, because if you have that mindset where every day you're going to look at your risk scorecard, you then bin that, right? You triage it, and you'd say, oh, there's some of this risk we can address right now today. I just need to go down to the watch floor and talk to the folks, change our process a little bit. But there's some of the risk that you can't address today, but you can talk to a vendor that may have an approach. And there's some risk that is much longer term that you said, look, we're going to have to accept some of this risk for now and mitigate it in other ways.
Well, let me build on to that. I can tell you now, a agency actually applied an SLA on 90% compliant to continuous ATO based on the control of the system.
Yeah, so it goes back to kind of where Harry Coker finished, right? And for universities, right, as we prepare cyber professionals to enter the federal workforce, I think part of that needs to be, how do I write contracts better? How do I look at including things like a novel approach to SLAs? And from a federal agency standpoint, I love the fact that Harry described some of the innovations that will be happening in hiring of workforce that will go towards skills-based and not just have cert-based or degree-based things. So these are all wonderful things. There's another piece that you described that I think also connects to Bobby's piece. You need to be citizen-centered within federal agencies and think about what this means to each of the citizens. And I love that you brought your tech-savvy mom into this. If you go to an agency because you deserve a benefit, you want to register for that benefit, and you can't navigate easily to that, what's your next step? You search. And that's the first conduit to fraud, right? So agencies also need to think about how they are presenting themselves to citizens at the end. And if you are administering a program and can't cleanly connect citizens to that program through a user interface that works and is compelling, then you're just setting up an opportunity for cyber criminals to inject in there. So I'd like to use this to shift to the third area of questioning, and that's this growing interdependency. Many of the things we talked about rely on a little bit of information there, which gets a process going, but you bring context from information gained over here. Often there's a location element to it because the sensors are measuring something that then tags it with the location that is derived only from GPS. We've got timing dependencies where the clocks that we use for telecommunications to connect router to router, switch to switch, radio to radio require a synchronization of time. We've got increased use of cloud, but we know even very high-end companies like, let's just take Microsoft Azure, right? We all love Microsoft, right? SolarWinds happened. Boom. If you've got your entire integrated, connected identity, credentialed access management piece that is dependent on a single cloud provider or a single identity, do we now have a new Achilles heel that needs to be looked at from an element of resiliency? Resiliency used to focus on availability, right? Do I have 4 or 5 nines to get to the building that has my data so that I can justify going to that building? But now if that 5 nines calculation doesn't include logic attacks that may take down every bit of software from, how do we approach the future and plan for resiliency so that we can degrade gracefully and don't have these Achilles heels built in? So Bob, I'm going to start with you on this one, this interconnected sense, make sense, act world that we're headed towards.
Okay. I guess I'll take it in my direction. I think some of what you're saying is about our resiliency and ability to respond, degrade gracefully. I think that you hit on a couple different subjects. So when we talk about GPS in space, I think there was just recently, within the last week or two, a really good New York Times kind of infographic that went over GPS, the attacks on GPS, jamming of GPS, where it happens the most in the world, which happens to be...
Ukraine just had a situation where the intentionally GPS was jammed in an area, synchronization was lost in the power grid, and it self-induced several explosions across the electrical power distribution because they're trying to defend against a GPS-based attack.
Sure. Yeah. So I think where I was starting to go with on this is it actually, though, explained how many of us, I actually worked on the GPS system when I was in uniform out in Colorado. So, it was really cool. The officers were up there flying the satellites, the enlisted were making sure they didn't screw it up. We were happy to help. What the New York Times really went into, we've maybe lost our technological edge in the U.S. on global positioning. So the European Union's Galileo, that does authenticated requests. China has deployed more satellites than us, has terrestrial systems.
Baidu involves two-way communication.
Yes. So I think where I'm more concerned is, when in the federal government, we often build very complex systems, systems that maybe are very expensive and the rest of the world doesn't even know about in the country. Our emergency communications division is a great example of that. We're building things we hope we never need. They are used all the time, though. They are used by first responders. During 9/11, both GETS and WPS, less WPS at the time. We had less wireless users.
Which are the prioritization programs
the prioritization
for wireless
programs,
and wireline communications.
that we have phenomenal partnerships with the telecoms. There is a classified element of that, too, so we can make sure that we can get calls through from different parts of the government as needed. These are absolutely critical programs that need to operate, almost beyond 5 nines. Like, we really can't tolerate a lot of downtime on them. I think one of the things that I encourage, because, we go through different stages in our career. Like, everyone wants to build this very complex system that's very expensive for any solution. Not every system needs to be like that. We need to really identify what are our critical elements, how they're designed. There's other systems that honestly can sustain substantial downtime, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that the people running those or using that data are any less important. It just means it's not one of the agency's mission essential functions.
A classic risk focus, right? It's not just the probability that something would happen. It's the impact of that.
It's the impact of what happened. Yeah. So I think that, CISA is doing a lot of great work in this area. The National Risk Management Center is really kind of our focus area that works with within CISA, as we are the sector risk management agency for 8 of the critical infrastructure areas of the United States. There's 16, so they work very closely with the others to do analysis and consequence analysis. That's ongoing this week with Beryl. Yeah, CISA is able to model telecom impacts, flooding, power impacts, and elsewhere using a lot of our systems. So I think that stuff, just really speaks to, a whole of government response, because FEMA obviously has the boots on the ground and a very large role back here, to get their programs up and running. But we all kind of support each other across DHS and with the other departments and agencies to kind of share information and make sure that, to your point, we provide good citizen services.
Yeah, so networks of networks to grade gracefully and teams of teams, right? Looking at the contributions of all. Let's shift to our last question, and feel free to include in that any interdependency parts that you'd like to talk about. But Bobby, I'll start with you. Let's talk about workforce. In the cybersecurity arena, we've had for over a decade now the National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education, 54 well-defined work roles. We love it as academics because we know, we need to produce people with degrees and curriculum that supports one of each of those 54, or all 54 of the work roles. HR people can take the NICE and turn that into a position description and go hire somebody. But I contend that there's some missing elements of NICE, and it's probably time for us to refresh our approach to HR. So can you talk a little bit about that? Where are we getting workforce right? What are the things that we should be looking at going forward to ensure that not only you have the right skill sets and experience in your organization, but those that support you, right? The contractors in this room have the right skill sets. What would you like to see in workforce?
Me or?
No, Bobby.
Oh, there you go.
We'll go with
Bobby, right?
There you go.
You'll be clean up on this one.
All
I
right,
just
so-
called you both Bob.
Yeah, great question. I think for me, it depends on the position being advertised. I know in my division, I hire senior information system security managers, and so I expect them to have at least 5 to 10 years of experience to include certifications. Education can be here and there, but I'm looking for...
What certs do you want to have?
Well, for my division, I would say CISSP would be a requirement, well, preferred.
To have CEH?
Well,
Think like an attacker?
Well, it depends on, again, the position being advertised, right? So what I don't want to happen is I'm advertising for a position and I'm requiring 15 certifications, right? That doesn't map with the job requirements itself. And I think we see that a lot in terms of job advertisements on Indeed and other places. But I would say, to answer your direct question, we can get better in terms of, hiring individuals, graduates coming from college, maybe taking on a more skills-based approach where, we have those individuals kind of, demonstrate practical application of a certain knowledge area per se.
A Python coding test.
I was about to, yeah. So that would be one for someone, that's in development. Again, it goes back to the requirement of the vacancy announcement. And I get it. Some people may think that the government way of hiring is pretty antiquated, and it could be to a certain degree. And so that's why, a cross-sector partnership between the government, academia, could go a long way. And I will say, there are some programs right now that are currently in place to kind of bridge that gap. One would be the Pathways Recent Graduate Programs, where the federal government is bringing on, individuals in uniform, or they're bringing on college graduates, and they're taking them through this training pipeline to get them up to a certain level where they can, help the agency or government execute their cyber mission. That's one. Number two would be scholarship for services, right? So where you have a 4-year graduate and they want to, pursue, let's say, higher education, and the government is saying, hey, listen, I will pay for your graduate degree, but you owe me 2 years of service. And so within that time frame, you're also eligible for promotion. And so those are some of the hiring vehicles that we can, I guess, leverage from a government perspective to bring on the bright and talented. But again, there has to be a sense of wanting to serve, the federal government, because, again, the pay may not be as commensurate between the government and private industry. But again, back to your question in terms of skills-based, I would definitely agree 100% that we have to move past, I would say, just basic interview questions, and we should really have that individual demonstrate that they have a certain level of knowledge about a topic area. Case in point, when I hire individuals for my division as an information system security manager, my interview questions are scenario-based, right? And so I want to make sure that if I put them on the spot, that they can answer those questions, but then most importantly, that they can execute if, let's say, I'm out of the office per se. And so it's not just, tell me about risk management or tell me, what is, CIA. It's questions like, if you are the ISSM for this cloud solution, what is your strategy to get the system authorized within a short time frame? And so now they have to think about project management. They have to think about stakeholder engagement. And so those are some of the things that I kind of embed within my interview questions to make sure that we hire the most qualified applicants.
Do you have internship opportunities at FEMA?
We have interns right now. Yes, we do, sir.
And hire them through USA Jobs?
Correct.
Outstanding. SAIC, you're paying all these big bucks and making it hard for these guys to get the right talent, right?
Shawn?
Actually, no.
What are the workforce challenges for you?
So, well, two things. I know time is running out. I want to hit the cloud issue with SolarWinds right quick. So first off, I come back to the zero trust conversation, right? Because first, everybody's in hybrid cloud. Even when you're in Azure, you're in multiple clouds. When you're in M365 and you're in Azure, it's all multiple clouds, right? So when you start to get into identity, segmentation of identity, application, data and the likes, and the throughputs, rolling that into your cyber framework, and actually embedding AI into that to actually drive operations, now you can deal with strange things happening that you didn't expect to happen. And that's actually being delivered today. That's one thing. So now, workforce.
And being ready to be agile in that, right? Because you're never going to figure it all up ahead of time.
No.
So have you built in the agility in your response?
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. You can't get around the operational side of now what do people actually do, right? And that's part of your controls, right? Yeah. But now coming back to the people side, I got to tell you today, I've been in several conversations across government about how do you actually deal with, like today, the federal government, 50% is eligible to retire. State government, 42 to 43% is eligible to retire. And when you look at what that means, and now you start to say, hey, the challenge of actually hiring folks, and now you have kids that are like, I much rather drive an Uber, right? I'm just saying, I'm just keeping it real, right? So now you start to look at what that actually means. So the challenge of getting talent isn't just government. That's across the board. And you almost have to bundle cloud, cyber all together, right? Into the same types of problem space of challenges of getting roles. Now, from a government perspective, right? I got to tell you, when you start to look at reorganizing resources and starting to look at what's inherently governmental versus where I'm actually going to have a service provider support and work as a partner to actually deliver the mission, now you have an opportunity to hire different types of people on the government side and partner them up, and interns, because now they're going to partner up and work with other integrators that are actually supporting the mission as a partner, right? When you start to look at it through that lens, you're going to get repeatability. You're going to get the ability to bring in, because now you're holding this contractor accountable for resources because it's outcome based, right? I got to have this mission delivered this way. And I'm looking at audiences. Some of the people I actually work with are in the audience, and they know that this is actually happening. But when you change the staffing approach from a government perspective of how you say, how do I now organize based on the state of play today? Because the state of play today, the way I would staff a government organization today is very different than when I was a CIO 10 years ago, right? So I would look at that differently, and then you can address that, right? And there are challenges because now, because you're buying outcomes, you aren't necessarily buying the hourly rate. And now you actually can end up getting more out of an actual Uber contract than you get out of you hiring this person and putting all of the energy into this person. But now you can hire people, train them up, and do interns. And yes, we do have intern programs. Come on over.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm just saying, to me, I think you have to think differently. And this kind of came out with FATAR, right? It's just like when Fatara came out, the resume for the CIO had to change, right? And it's the same way when you look at, if I'm in any government agency, how I look at staffing has to change, and the impacts of the decisions that are made are so big.
I was a part of an intern program that SAIC did, where you used your summer interns in a very novel way and put them into competing teams around Shark Cage
Right.
at the time. And it was just a fantastic use. We had a business guy with a technician guy, a student, and really great work there. CISA, what do you see as the cyber workforce challenges going forward?
Yeah, there's definitely a couple things. So we're definitely not having a problem recruiting. We get many applicants. I think that has to do with our approach. The leadership of Director Easterly making it
Everyone wants to be cool in cyber now. With,
well, I think that
he's
we've
wonderful.
shown,
Yeah.
a different approach to federal recruiting.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too is I don't expect people to be feds for their whole career. Come in, do a couple years, leave. Maybe you come back. Maybe you don't. Maybe you learn something different. I think that we haven't touched on. We have a huge diversity problem in IT and cyber. We have an absolutely huge. As someone who didn't walk to get their degree until they were 40. Oh, geez, Boston accent came out there. It came out there really hard. Really hard. And doesn't have a degree in IT or mathematics or stuff like that. You need to be looking at the whole scope of people.
Yes.
I think in my organization, CIO's office is not successful without strong contracts teams, finance teams. I have two leads there, Taria Breckenridge and Raina Friday, that run that like outstanding. And that kind of, you need all these things in an office to run effectively. So I think on my front, we do have the cyber talent management system that we are utilizing quite heavily. It allows us to bring in people that maybe just have an interest in cyber or IT, without any training, without any background, which I think are very important. Of course, as a veteran, very interested in recruiting veterans and giving people opportunity. I was definitely one of the people, having been in, supporting law enforcement for a long period of time. We were always in person. We were in person for large parts of COVID as well, because you can't clear passengers from your home. You can't inspect cargo, although we do have some remote capabilities now. I was a little bit against all this remote and telework, but you kind of have to adjust and make it work. So, my team is spread. We have actually people in Hawaii. Leadership team like Paige Collier, who runs my ICAM team. She's out in Arizona. So you have to be open to those ideas. And I think I agree. Like we have a challenge in federal government on recruiting. It should be speedier. Shouldn't take 12 months to onboard. Shouldn't, should be able to start without your clearance if you want to. And sometimes that's hard depending if you're Title V, Title VI, all these other things that we deal with. I think in our partner community on the contractor side, one thing I'd ask, please stop being so whiny. Like, if I don't want to meet, maybe it's just I had a bad week. I think we expect different things. I really like when they self-govern. It shouldn't be me telling you you're not performing, you don't have the technical skills on the team that
You want them to be able to self-assess and to
self-assess and self-govern.
Yeah.
Remove people before we have to. Work with us in a partnership. Like, there's nothing worse than getting that meeting and then saying, well, tell me your deepest thoughts, Bob, and your priorities. I can't help you. I'm like all of you. I'm back to back throughout the day. Help us help you, because we need you. We look for different things in our partner community than in our feds. And I do try really hard. There's probably many people that have worked with me for many years. It's bilateral. I actually want pushback. Bob, we failed because your team didn't do X. Okay, how do we correct that? Like, I needed to know that. So I think the other thing I'll just close with is, like, if you have any interest in being a CIO or a senior Fed, like you have to learn contracting. You have to learn how to do it effectively. My role would be a complete failure if I didn't have a almost a morning and night sync with our chief of the contracting operation, Juan Arashia. Like we talk all the time because we're not successful without each other. But to be perfectly honest, I need him far more than he needs me. And so you have to spend time building those relationships to do, I think someone else mentioned, like, we have to write better contracts.
Yeah.
I see a lot of contracts that go out. It's like, oh, wow. No one's going to be successful at this because we're not telling anyone what we want, but they know we have a lot of money or things like that. So I think good,
Well, I love
effective contract
where you helped us finish here, because it's so important, and I guarantee you he does need you.
But it's a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think effective contract management is vitally important.
Well, and finishing with your previous point to that, the importance of diversity within a cyber organization, that it's not just the diversity of where we came from, but it's having experiential diversity. It's having a diversity of academic experience and training experience, and you're not spotting the next new threat if you don't have a part of your team that is uniquely contributing from a diverse experience. So that's so good. Well, this has been just wonderful for me to learn from you all.